Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. This episode, we've got a story adapted from an email sent to us by a guy who promised me I could use his real name. So I wrote the whole thing up and showed it to him, and he was like, I didn't say you could use my real last name, so I'm only allowed to use his first name, which is John. Since there's hardly anyone named John in the United States, I'm sure you all know exactly the person I mean. If you've seen or interacted with a Dogman or other mysterious or cryptid entity, please feel free to share the story with us, either via email at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or else by calling our voicemail hotline, 1-804-LASCARY. That's 804-536-2279, and you can leave us your story that way. Since Google Voice cuts off after every 3 minutes or so, please feel free to call back as many times as you need to, and we'll edit it together later. Now, without further ado, allow me to cede the floor to our alleged witness, John, as I read his account of the time that, and I quote, I saw a Dogman stuck in quicksand. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'm writing to tell you about Dogman in the Bridgewater Triangle. That's an area in Massachusetts south of Boston where Lauren Coleman and other 14 researchers claim strange things continually take place. Giant birds, Bigfoot, glowing sentient orbs, Pukwudgie, and even Dogman are known to appear and disappear out of nowhere, especially around the Hockomock Swamp. They say its name means place where spirits dwell. I have no way to check on that, but if it isn't true, probably should be. Now, I first heard about the Bridgewater Triangle from my friend, who saw a real-life werewolf in it, back in, I think, 1978 or 79. He wasn't in the swamp when he had his encounter, though. He was on Lakeside Drive by Lake Nippenicket in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. No, I don't have friends rich enough to live over there, but my friend was working as a delivery guy back in the late 70s and early 80s, and he had to special deliver something to this mansion at the end of the road by the lake, right? So he finishes his delivery, and he's driving back the way he came on Lakeside Drive, wondering what it must feel like to be rich enough to own one of those beautiful estates over there. He was looking out at the water as he drove, and it's a good thing he was, too, because out of that water jumped this big, dripping, wet dog right up onto the road. My friend screeched his delivery truck to a halt in time to avoid hitting the giant dog, who he said was taller than the front hood of his car when it stood on all fours. The dog walked right out in front of the truck and then did that thing that dogs do where they shake back and forth vigorously in order to dry themselves off. Water went everywhere, as well as mud, dirt, aquatic plant life, and who knows what else. My friend's truck was made filthy inside of 3 seconds, and he knew he was the one that his boss was going to make clean it off, too. Losing his temper, my friend got out of the truck and shouted at the dog that he was bad. Meanwhile, the large canine just glared at my buddy, unhappy with him for interrupting his grooming after his swim. The beast decided to express his unhappiness, and to do so, he stood up on his hind legs, like a man. Now he towered over my friend and his boss's delivery truck both. The Dogman shook himself again, and now the added height spewed mud and crap all over the top of the truck, as well as all over my friend as well. He told me he stood there until the dog was done, wiped the mud out of his eyes, then slowly climbed back inside and drove away. The dog remained behind, grooming its privates in the middle of the very exclusive roadway. So that story is what got my buddy into reading about the Bridgewater Triangle, and he was the one who first educated me about the entire thing. A few years after that, when I started working for the electric company who shall be named later, I got hazed. A lot. by the other guys just because I was the rookie. When one of them found out that I was a believer in the Bridgewater Triangle and that I was especially scared of the Hockomock Swamp, he told everybody else who worked there. Then, the guys decided let's haze the new guy, and I was doomed. It was a different time. Guys still acted like, guys back in those days, both for better and this time, for worse. So all this green over here is the Hockomock Swamp, and this straight line being cut through it is the clear cut for the high-tension electric lines. You can access it easily from the highway right here, or at least those of us legally allowed to can. If you look closely, you'll see little gates across the dirt paths to let you know this is not a place for the public. Besides the danger of the high power lines overhead, these were also built through a swamp. Swamps have their own dangers, which is why I think they made the clear cut so wide over there. If something charges out at you from the tree line, at least you have a few seconds to say your prayers. Now, they're not going to send one guy out alone to work on these kinds of power lines, especially not at night. So I knew this was just a BS hazing, but I didn't really know what I was going to do once I got to the place that they told me to go. Something about how I had to fix whatever was broken. So I walked out to where they told me to walk to, and nothing looked broken out there to me. It sure did look creepy though. I could hear crickets, but I could hear other sounds too. I guess some of them might have been frogs, but there were a number of noises I couldn't identify. I wondered if that was that, if the prank on me was over, and if I could go back, or if they had something even worse planned for me. And then, my worst nightmare came true. Something, some kind of a large animal, ran out at me from the woodline. I'm not much of a church goer, so I skipped the prayers, and I climbed up 15 or 20 feet on one of those towers they have the electric lines running across the tops of. As I looked down on that animal, it looked more human than creature to me. In the dark, I thought I was seeing a man in a costume. Keep in mind that my line of thinking was that I was being pranked, and that colored what I was seeing before I even looked at it. I shouted insults at the guy, whoever or whatever he was. He looked very tall, so I tried crying out the name of the tallest of my coworkers to see if he would admit it was a gag. Instead, the upright walking dog-headed man thing picked up my heavy toolbox that I dropped before climbing up. He threw that box much further than I know I could have ever thrown it. Well, that shut me up for a second, but when the jerk ran into the woods and disappeared, I had a few choice words for him. Now, picking up a heavy toolbox and tossing it as far as a quarterback could throw was not something that animals were known to do in those days. I knew it had to be a man, and I knew it had to be one of the guys I worked with. I also knew I had to collect my tools and box and get out of there, so I climbed it down. Grumbling and collecting my tools as I found them strewn about, one by one, I walked toward the tree line. Inside the darkened woods, I could see the toolbox itself, and most of the remaining tools crashed in a pile, lying in the shadows. I walked into the even darker tree cover slowly. Partially, that was to allow my eyes to adjust to the darker lighting. Partially, it was so I could listen to hear if the guy in the werewolf costume was gonna jump out at me again. And, partially, it was because the place stunk like rotten eggs. When I listened, I could actually hear this weird sound, like a sort of a moaning. Curious, I walked in further, past my toolbox, and I saw that guy in the Wolfman costume, up to his chest, flailing about and moaning, sinking in quicksand. Now remember, I was convinced I was being pranked, and I assumed this was one of my buddies from work in the werewolf getup. Of course, when I saw him in danger, I wanted to save the guy. I told him to calm down, that the more he moved around, the faster he would sink. He didn't seem to care though, and he kept wildly trying to get out of his predicament. I reached out my hand to him to help pull him out, and instead of holding on and allowing me to save him, he snapped at my hand with his giant fanged jaws, nearly biting 4 fingers off at once. Furious, I wanted to give him a piece of my mind for that, but when I looked into those eyes, I did not see a human soul looking back into mine. My brain finally put it together. I was not looking at the glass doll eyes of a werewolf costume. I was looking into the black, soulless orbs in the skull of some sort of actual dog-headed beast man. The Bridgewater Triangle was real, and so was the Dogman. But the only way anyone was ever gonna know, the only way I would live to tell any of you, was if I backed away and allowed this Dogman to die horribly in the quicksand. The way I saw it that day was that if I left him, he'd probably die. But if I helped him, then he'd probably kill me. I left there and radioed in my story from my vehicle. I asked the guys what I should do and they all just laughed. They figured I was pranking them back, but I was actually telling the truth. I didn't know what to do, so I drove to a payphone, remember those, and left an anonymous message with the police saying someone was stuck in the quicksand and saying where it was as well as I could describe before my dime ran out. I don't know if they sent anyone out, but it helped me with my conscience. Even though that Dogman would have bitten off the hand that was trying to save him, I still didn't want to do him any harm. I'm sorry if that makes me sound like Yule Gibbons or Grizzly Adams. If you don't know those names, just ask your great-grandmother. I'm the kind of guy who lets my cat and dog sleep on top of me when I watch a movie at home, even if they make my foot fall asleep. I have a live and let live kind of an attitude. Those jokers I worked with sent me into that Dogman's personal hunting ground, and so the Dogman got annoyed. See, that's where the Dogman works, the Hockomock Swamp, and his job is to catch things and eat them. I was gumming up the works. Would you like it if the Dogman came to your job and scared away your potential clients? Well, that's what I was doing by tromping around his swamp at night. And then, I caused him to fall in that deep quicksand by accident. You can laugh at me all you want, but I still feel terrible that I couldn't do something more. The time that I saw a Dogman stuck in quicksand. We got the best EP from here to Canarsie. She's none other than Deborah Darcy. Please join us in thanking our newest channel member, Deborah Darcy, for making this episode possible. In exchange, we share with her our weekly secret uncensored Dogman stories far too wild to ever run on this channel. And now here's international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman to fill in the rest of the deeds. Hank? Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal subscribers club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.